Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Pain Free Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Dana Jones, and today I am joined by Dr. Mary Burmeister. She is an empowerment and fitness coach out of Colorado. Welcome, Mary.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me.
So, you and I connected, and we have so many things in common. And of course, you are a collegiate athlete.
Yes.
So, how does that wrap into everything that you're doing right now?
Well, it absolutely shaped who I am. I'm sure with most athletes, especially collegiate athletes, 4 years of dedication and, discipline and drive and, constantly competing, that just doesn't go away. Definitely has shaped everything moving forward in my life for the last, 15, 20 years, which I'm sure you can relate to.
For sure. And I just always the key is, so what is your official title? Because you have a lot of things that kind of fit under you.
Well, I'm a doctor of physical therapy and then also a fitness and empowerment coach.
And so, what have you used or pulled from your experience? Because I think a lot of times we as athletes, become the things that possibly we didn't receive in terms of support, especially as female collegiate athletes. Because for those of you who haven't had that experience, it's pretty entertaining. The guys get their uniforms washed and get brand new equipment and all that other stuff. And sometimes the women are just lucky to wash their own clothes, or have the good facility. But there's things, like to be an empowerment coach, there's certain things that people need. And how do you feel that your experience as an athlete kind of played into your role now?
So, being an athlete, it's an all or nothing mindset, it seems like. And the more I travel down this journey, understanding that all or nothing mindset has really, impacted my life in positive and negative ways. We tend to constantly think we need to be, pushing ourselves and not taking breaks or resting. And for me, that led to a lot of burnouts over the years. And I see so many women lead, that leads to burnouts because we just constantly feel like we have to push and prove ourselves. And funny you say that about like the men, a lot of people don't understand is, with females with hormones and men that don't have that same makeup, they can continuously go for, hours on end where, you know, learning that we need to take breaks and it's okay to take a break. But in this society, it's a very masculine driven society that we just constantly have to prove ourselves. And, that's where I kind of have, realigned my visions and how I coach, because coming out of that state of burnout, like there's a lot of beauty behind it, and getting people to buy into that. And speaking with you, something similar, having happened to you as well.
Right. Well, I think it's always interesting when you're dealing with women, especially because of the fact that there is this like, we got to fucking drive on, right? It's the military mentality is like, fight, fuck it and drive on. And I think women have to do that more often because of the fact that there is this societal pressure, of course, on men to be breadwinners. And really, there is no rest, right? That they're supposed to be working 15-hour days or whatever, that kind of thing. And we're supposed to be wrapping everything up and doing stuff ourselves, as well as care for little humans if you have them, or whatever it may be, or that we can't look weak. And so I guess my question is like, you have a very interesting job, because it's like, how do you teach balance? I guess it would probably be the best thing, right? Because that's got to be your biggest challenge, right? Is that a lot of times women are very like all in. So how do you teach them to kind of, taper off, or have a balance that leads to a healthy lifestyle?
Right. So, just starting off, getting them to, buy into just taking on simple habits. So, starting with a very basic fitness program to move their body, just doing body weight to reconnect their mind to their body, decrease some of that, high intensity fight or flight, constantly feeling we need to push, just, keeping it very simple. And then, with the nutrition, a lot of people try to take on, I'm going to take this new diet and then I'm going to take this exercise and I'm going to do it all and I'm going to just I'm just going to do it. I know I can. Well, then they burn out. So again, making one small change in their nutrition to start with. And, the biggest thing that I've noticed with a lot of the women is, they're eating in such a caloric deficit to start with because they feel like, the less calories, the more I move, like the more weight I'm going to lose, but I'm still stuck, at this stagnant weight, feeling, puffy and swollen. And so just implementing one full meal with them has made such huge changes in their energy levels. And when I say full meal is, something balanced with, a dense carb, like whole food carb, a protein and a vegetable, and just making sure they have that one sustainable meal. Things have their energy just skyrockets. And so then they start buying in to just making small changes.
How much does nutrition play? Because you specialize with people over
Right.
how much does nutrition play in sleep?
It's pretty significant. Personal experience, just, doing a bodybuilding competition and being in a low carb state, like realizing how crappy my sleep was at times when, my carbs were so low, learning that carbs really, they aren't bad. And we're like, society has made them seem so bad. And it's more, obviously the processed foods, the sugars. But when we start eating, whole foods and, dense complex carbs, it's amazing how much more you sleep and you stay asleep through the night because your body is not in this constant state of survival and starvation, basically.
Which is interesting because you're doing this, right, to show, for those of you, Dr. Mary's participated in the NPC competitions, which are kind of intense. And so you're in this ideal, right? You have to look a certain way. I mean, this is probably the worst nightmare of a woman is to be judged on your body for balance of muscular size, as well. And obviously posing plays a big part in it, right? The positions
Right.
that you put your body. But for the most part, they are looking like there's nothing to hide. You're in a bikini, but you need to look a certain way. So with that sleep, right? Sleep is a part of your recovery program. So
Mm-hmm.
what happens, right? Like with muscular recovery when you're not getting good sleep? Like is there a comparison to how you felt before you competed versus like while you were, getting prepped?
Absolutely. Thankfully, with my job, I could, if I wasn't getting, quality sleep, or a lot of it was I couldn't fall asleep.
Mm-hmm.
So, making sure you're getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep because your body needs to recover. And if those days that I still wasn't getting, quality sleep and I get up and do my workout, I just was miserable. And, I hit a point, 10 weeks out that I was like, I can't sustain this. Like I was literally miserable, couldn't even get myself energized to work out, and just making some small changes in what I was eating and reevaluating, because it is super important to going down that road to, really evaluate, because everybody's different. And I have a super high metabolism where somebody else may not. So being in such a deficit and being monitored by somebody that has experience in it is also super important, because you're going through a lot of changes, and being in that deficit, like your hormones just you're not giving enough to sustain your vital functions, basically, to
Right.
cut all of the fat. So yes, I did this mainly so I could learn what it was like, because I wanted to feel how people, you know, that are eating in a restrictive state, might feel on a daily basis, and why they don't have the energy to work out, just doing, simple 20 to 30 minutes of light exercise. And I got my answers.
That's awesome.
And it's been a journey after competition to like come out of that state. Like it's a gradual process, and you can't
Mm-hmm.
just go back to eating 3,000 calories. Like you have to gradually, because let me tell you, I've had episodes of binging, and it's very common. That's the same with, people that take on an all or nothing diet, or like this new fad diet, and they restrict and lose weight quickly. Well, they gain it right back, because when you let loose, like it's so hard to stop the binge if you're restricting, significantly.
Yeah, it's I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that have competed who have some kind of disordered eating as a result of it. And I'm sure a lot of my stuff, because back in the day I was bodybuilding, and I was at the no fat no carb thing, and it was a nightmare, and I made myself sick. I mean,
Right.
and I didn't have, I had the coaching on the, bodybuilding piece, the posing, and all the things that you need to do to prep for the competition, but I did not
Mhm.
receive any nutritional advice except for don't eat that. And so probably for like 3 months out, I was eating chicken and broccoli, boiled
Right.
chicken and broccoli.
Yeah.
And, it destroyed my gut to the point where I made myself lactose intolerant. Like all these things happen because if you're not digesting these foods on a regular basis, your body's like, oh, I guess we're not doing that anymore. And so
Right.
then it doesn't happen. So I learned, unfortunately, the hard way because I was so sick, and then had to recover by using like nutritional enzymes and all these things to get myself back. And we won't even, I was a heavyweight, and I was 130 pounds, and I was competing, and I'm 5'6", and I was competing against women that were like 5'10" or 5'11" and 130 pounds. And so
Wow.
needless to say, I did not look great next to them because, they're all like absolutely shredded, and I'm looking good. I'm feeling proud of myself. When you look at the pictures, you're like, well, you looked a little puffy. And it really does make you very critical of yourself. I mean, you become very hyper vigilant in a bad
Absolutely.
way. That is, so you have all this experience now. One, of course, the burning question is, are you going to do it again?
I haven't decided. I mean, going on stage for the first time and literally like making the decision 18 weeks out, not really like fully training bodybuilding up until that point. I mean, I'd been lifting consistently, but I'd also been running marathons and such. So like my body composition has changed so much over the last 3 years. But, going on that stage and knowing that the way I felt, and that was the biggest thing, was just more confidence, learning how to, what it would feel like. And, having that confidence on that stage and just like at the out of body experience was the most amazing feeling after, a lot of insecurities, low self-worth after a divorce, things like that. But, you know, walking away with a fourth place medal, I was very honored. And just thank you very much.
Props for you.
So I mean, in the back of my mind, I know if I trained and, actually focused on it for a year and went back, I like, how good could I, actually be? And really dialed in on the posing because that was the hardest thing. I was resistant to it,
Hmm.
practicing, but I had to force myself, especially, during that state of like starvation and kind of going into a low mood. It was really hard to do something uncomfortable that I was like, I don't like this.
Right.
But yeah, so it's still up in the air. This reverse process has been a struggle. So I don't know if, depends on how my body comes out of it. And, it is a lot of negatives, on the body going through that cut and depletion stage.
It's similar to, I've competed in triathlon, and especially when you were talking about the caloric deficit, of course I giggled because probably the most dramatic rides I've ever had, because cycling seems to do something more than other parts, right? The run,
Right.
it's like you can feel horrible, but then you just walk, and there's some negative, communication that's happening in your head or whatever. But there's something about being on a bicycle and being all alone and being in that caloric deficit because you're a nut. And,
Mhm.
you start to like, I have no friends, like as you're going through it. And it's just ridiculous. And you have no idea. And then you stop and you have like a bar, or you eat a peanut
Mhm.
butter and jelly sandwich or something like that. And then all of a sudden you're like, I love you, man. And it's just to do that consistently. I mean, it really does mess with your body. And I know that as women, we are sensitive to those set points of, changing our body composition, so that's always a thing. You're in that phase where you're still fairly young, so you may not be messing with it too badly. I think a lot of times if you go for a number of years, eventually,
Right.
you felt comfortable at whatever 150, and then all of a sudden 150 turns into 160, and then 160 turns into 180, just because your body doesn't like are the yo-yos, and we
Right.
just don't have the hormone production to kind of do that. So you have stuff that you've been doing. You've been working on mindset with clients. You are doing what I love, which is a holistic approach. Do you want to explain, like, if I'm a client and I come and see you, what am I getting?
So, like I kind of mentioned before, we really, focus on just basic fundamental movements to start because, as a physical therapist and, seeing being a, gym rat most of my life and just seeing people come in and just throw a bunch of weights on and lifting heavy, I was guilty of that too myself, like being a collegiate athlete, like my pride, like I can do this. And, starting going back to just doing basic fundamental movements and strengthening those non-glamorized muscles, within the hips and the pelvis and the core, like just to build a strong foundation and, release a lot of tension because we carry so much stress in like our pelvic area and there's so many imbalances, especially if you've had kids or an injury playing sports, like things just shift and we get so off balance, like physically. So just retraining that aspect and then, going into a more nutrition based, just a mindful eating, building a sustainable, habits, and then focusing in on the mindset, which helps truly reduce like the stress and the constant, chaos in the brain, like it's not okay to rest. I feel guilty. There's a lot of shame if I rest, like I should be going harder and just really, tapping into that. And, like I, have, the last 6 months or so, like I've really focused in on that for myself. And it's made a significant change in my performance and just my daily life. And then, with my business, like managing all of that mentally, there's a lot of stimulation, but if we can start down regulating that and down regulating the stress, like that's where, rest really is important with my clients because like the first 30 days, you're going through a huge change, like bringing yourself out of that survival state. And I get a lot like, I'm super exhausted. Like I have energy, but like I just crash hard. Like I'm exhausted. And it's like, yes, like your body was like in this high arousal state. And now we're bringing it out of that. So it's like, oh my God, finally off this roller coaster, I can take a break. So really, giving them encouragement to take an extra day if we need to. And that's why we're not scheduling 7 days of workouts. We're, 3 to 4, maybe 5, depending on, where they started and just gradually building, one habit at a time.
Okay. And you have multiple levels of programs that you offer your clients?
Right. So yeah, right now I have a 6 week, just basic, you know, starting from the basics. And then I just recently implemented a 6 month program, for that athlete who wants, a total body recomp because it takes, if you're in a caloric deficit or, you're not fueling properly, it takes quite a while to get out of that state. You can't just do that in, a week's time. So, gradually going out of that and then building a long-term plan, especially if they have a specific goal. Like right now I have a marathon runner who, put herself in a survival state. And it's like, you'd look at her and think like you run marathons, but it was just a lot of inflammation
Mhm.
because not eating enough. And, when she finally realized like she's not eating enough and it's like, I don't know how you ran these many marathons and, having different injuries. So
But that does happen, right? I mean, and I've never seen, like if you ever go to marathons, there are people that the older ones, especially the people who have been doing marathons for a long time, I mean, there is that marathoner look where their shoulders are slumped, they're probably, underweight or whatever, because there is that, and I think it's also hard to run and eat, to be on it, right? So there has to be some intelligence about it. And I don't know how much information is really out there about knowing how to fuel during the run. And, what is your opinion on the chews, the goos, and all the things?
Yeah, so I've done one marathon, and I did a half marathon the year prior to that, and I definitely was not fueling properly outside of, running, because I was stressed. And for me personally, when I'm stressed, I don't have an appetite, knowing that I needed to eat, but I just like could not force food down. So that was one of my challenges, but it also led to, after effects, hair loss, and just different things with my body after the race. So then the next year I really focused on like trying to, eat more, do, smaller meals, making sure I had things made, like just being very mindful and trying to reduce my outside stress so I could eat. But like marathon running, like during the race and such, I crashed in the last 6 miles, which
Mm.
is very common. You train up to about 20 miles, and, learning about, again, nutrition in that aspect and timing wise, and maybe eating differently up until that race. But again, everybody's different, and, how they're going to process the fuels for that long duration. And yeah, and, I just did gels and goos, and then, Gatorade and water, but
Mm-hmm.
you still, again, you completely deplete your body.
Right.
And so the best, I personally don't know the best thing, but I mean, yeah, it's a lot of like the stuff that I've researched is, the gels and the goos that give you quick glucose. But if you don't have long-term stores, because a lot of people get super lean, so you don't
Right.
have anything to really tap into, muscle breakdown does occur. And I've experienced that personally too. That first half marathon year I trained, I experienced a lot of muscle breakdown because I wasn't eating enough. So
Right.
again, everything is like a huge balancing act, but understanding every body is different and every person's going to respond differently. So it's kind of a trial and error with different people, and, along with your training, dabbling in different things, trying things out to see what
Yeah.
feels best.
And, just for those of you who may be thinking about it, do not do anything new within 3 months of
Right.
your race. Don't
Right.
go, oh, I'm going to change my shoes. Oh, I'm going to try this gel. It's going to be great, because so and so, because it'll all be bad. If anybody's raced a lot, that it's just gnarly if you make any change. And it's like, it's an epidemic. We all want to change something. We're like, there's going to be that one thing that's going to make it better, and it doesn't make it
Mhm.
better. I've never heard
No.
anybody say, I did this and it was fantastic. It's like, I did this and I cramped for 3 miles, or I had blisters the size of Texas on the bottom of my feet. It's like never a good idea. So you have your programs and you have your recomp for the 6 month, and then your ageless athlete is how long?
The ageless athlete is a 12-weeker, just really to get you started, implemented. And, there's definitely long-term, options after that, but it's just very intensive one-on-one coaching, virtual coaching, just to give you a lot of the basics and get you back to the fundamentals that as an athlete, it came down to, a basketball player, it comes down to the fundamentals and how well you can do those fundamental movements. So that is the same with fitness, is, you know, perfecting those fundamental exercises without the weights before we start building and loading the barbell.
Do you find that you get a lot of athletes that kind of need almost like retraining, or so like I'm older than you, so I get a lot of people that were totally tormented during physical education at school, and were told they would never amount to anything. They failed the class because they couldn't run or couldn't climb the rope or whatever. Are you seeing those types of people where you're having to recover their self-esteem as well as get them toward their goal?
Absolutely. I mean,
Nothing's changed, and
no, I mean,
which is
those
sad.
those ideas don't leave our brains. Like, they're there. Again, it comes down to the mindset. And for everybody that's listening, you have access to my amazing tool of 9 strategies to start reframing your mindset over some of those things and processing. Because yeah, every male PE teacher that told you that you weren't good enough, or, I had male coaches that constantly were in your ear and telling you things that didn't always feel like you were good enough. And, utilizing the tools to overcome that has definitely been super helpful in just calming the mind and, you know, being able to reframe and to tell yourself, like, I can do this. Like, I'm an athlete, I can do it. And then, just building a foundation and taking it one step at a time.
Fantastic. Well, Dr. Mary, thank you so much for joining me. How can we reach you?
So, like I said, I, sorry, you can find me on Instagram at Empowered Without Limits. And you can head to my website and grab that Fearless Focus guide at bit.ly/Fearless Focus. And the link will be in the show notes. And you can reach me from there as well.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
All right. We'll talk soon.